So as anyone who's been following me on Facebook knows, I've been a fan of the Foundation for Economic Education for many, many, many years now. They just have so many great articles with so much great stuff. But when you're wrong, and they posted an article they were completely wrong about called Privatizing Marriage Makes No Sense from Shika Dalmia. And as I sit here to record it, I know that they've already listed a response from Max Borders, so that might be something to check out. I haven't read it yet because I wanted this to be my own take on this, just from my own reaction to what she wrote. So yes, this is a response to the gay marriage ruling and libertarians saying now what we need to do is to get government out of the marriage business altogether. But she says, quote, "But even though privatizing marriage is gaining popularity, it is an incoherent concept that, if anything, will actually increase, not decrease, government interference in marriage." Well, that sounds like a pretty extraordinary claim, so let's see if she has extraordinary arguments to back it up. At the most basic level, even if we can get the government out of the business of issuing marriage licenses, it still has to record and register these partnerships and or authorize the entities that perform them before they can have any legal validity, just as it registers property and issues titles and deeds. Okay, yeah. So you just take the record of your marriage down to the Register of Deeds, you pay them $10 and they record it. So what? Therefore, government will need to set rules and regulations as to what counts as a legitimate marriage deed. Why? Why? You can take any contract down to your Register of Deeds. Pay $10 or whatever. And my local one is $10. I mean, they'll take any contract, any agreement, any document you want to have a copy of, where you want the government to be able to certify that, yes, this contract or whatever this document was filed at this particular time. It won't simply accept any marriage performed in any church or any domestic partnership contract signed by anyone. Why not? They'll accept any other contract. They'll accept anything. I think there might be places where the Register of Deeds doesn't accept everything, but where they don't, you can always take it to the clerk of court and file it there. So, and I mean, even absent that, we didn't always have marriage licensing in this country. You know what people used to do? You know how they used to record marriages? They wrote them down in the family Bible. They'd have this big, huge Bible. I remember one of these at my grandma's house, just this humongous, big white Bible. And you open it up, and on the inside pages are the lists of all of the marriages in the family going back like over 100 years. So-and-so married, so-and-so on this date, and so on. And they also had records of births and deaths, and that was a big part of how people kept records back then. They didn't go to the government to do it. They didn't go in and say, "Oh, please, mother, may I, will you please recognize my marriage?" No! They didn't care if government recognized their marriage. The only reason marriage licenses existed, the only reason they started being a thing in this country, is because government wasn't able to restrict marriage, and they wanted to. They wanted to stop blacks and whites from getting married. So anyway, suppose that Osho, the Rolls-Royce collecting guru who encouraged sexual freedom before getting chased out of Oregon, performed a group wedding uniting 19 people. Maybe the government should register all 19 as a married unit, but it'll require a culture war to get it to do that. Why? Why? It's not like we have to do that with any other contract where more than 2 people are involved. You want a contract with 19 other people to do something, you just make the contract, everyone signs it, and register the Register of Deeds. You don't even need to do that anymore. We've got technology now. There has been at least one marriage registered in the Bitcoin blockchain, and that is a secure, permanent, public record. And it's cheaper than going to the Register of Deeds. I mean, all you really need is a record of it happening. Ditto for a marriage or a civil union between a consenting mother and son, and what should the age of consent be? Or should there even be one at all? Look, we've got these issues already with contract law. We already have the solutions for them. A minor cannot enter into a legal contract. This is a complete non-issue. In other words, this kind of privatization won't take the state out of marriage. It will simply push its involvement and the concomitant culture wars to another locus. No, it'll just be contracts. That's what it'll be. It'll be a contract. As far as the government's concerned, that's all a marriage should be. I know most of us think that marriages are more than that. I agree they are, but not in ways that the government needs to worry about. Furthermore, true privatization would require more than just getting the government out of the marriage licensing and registration business. It would mean giving communities the authority to write their own marriage rules and enforce them on couples. How? What? How? Gee, it makes no sense. This would obviously mean letting Mormon marriages be governed by the Book of Mormon, Muslims by Quranic Sharia, Hasids by the Old Testament, and gays by their own religious institution or non-religious equivalent. So what? If that's what they want to do, if that's what they voluntarily agree with, who are you to tell them that they shouldn't enter into such an agreement? But what if an individual in one of those faiths rejects its marriage tenets? Then they won't agree to it. They won't agree to it. They'll write their contract in a way that those tenets aren't in there. Where would they go to get married? Bitcoin blockchain? A civil marriage performed by a justice of the peace would be out because that option would have to be nixed when state and marriage are completely separated. Yeah, but all you really need is the contract registered somewhere in a way that it couldn't be denied that the contract was made. We've got several ways of doing that. Libertarians would argue that these people can embrace another faith or simply declare themselves in a union, but giving communities the right to set their own marital rules also means giving them the right to control any possible exit options for couples. If the state tried to define when and how individuals could exit, it would be back in the business of regulating marriage. No, it wouldn't. Contract law. How do people get out of contracts? Just think it through. Consider another problem. Allowing communities to set their own marital norms would mean giving, say, a Muslim man the right to divorce his Muslim wife by saying divorce 3 times as per Sharia law's requirement. Well, if that's what they agreed to, that's what they agreed to. If she didn't like it, she should have had the contract written up a different way. The contract says this is how you get out of it, and then someone does the things to get out of it, and then you're out of it. While leaving her with minimal financial support. This actually happens in India and elsewhere. Yeah, I'm sure India and those other places just have private marriages all over the place. Yeah. Obviously, that would hardly be an advance for marriage equality. What, because hubby wouldn't be able to give her money anymore? The reason that calls to abolish marriage, to quote Kinsley, lead to such absurd results is that they are based on a fundamental misconception about the function marriage serves in a polity. The Cato Institute's Jason Kuznicki notes that marriage, properly understood, is a negative pre-political right that in the liberal understanding of things the government doesn't grant, it guarantees. It makes as much sense, therefore, to abolish marriage in the name of unshackling it from the government's clutches as it would, say, to abolish property rights to free them from the government. Now let's think about this. If it's a negative pre-political right, then it's no different than the right to free speech. What if government started giving out free speech licenses? We'd be hitting the ceiling over that, wouldn't we? Yeah, I mean, look at what's all going on. Governments want to give licenses to have handguns, despite the Second Amendment. Courts keep smacking them down. I mean, has there been any thought put into this? This is just not what I've come to expect from the Foundation for Economic Education. Just as property rights, at least in principle, establish the scope and limits of state power over an individual, no, they establish the scope and limits of what an individual can do without interference. You can do whatever you want on your own property with your own property, but as soon as you intrude on the property of others, you're initiating force. Marriage does something similar for couples. It basically establishes their right to jointly own property and inherit it from each other, to keep and raise their children, and to make medical decisions for the other when one is incapacitated. Well, why can't they just do that? If you own property, then that means you can give that property to someone else. If you can give that property to someone else, then it logically means that you can contract with that person to jointly own the property. Same thing with inheritance. You specify in your will that this is what happens with your property, and it's your property, you make that decision. To keep and raise their children. Oh, that's just bullshit. That's bullshit. We have unmarried couples raising children all the time. And to make medical decisions for each other, well, you have a medical power of attorney. It'd be nice if it were stronger. The advantage of marriage is that it's a medical power of attorney that trumps like other family members, and an ordinary power of attorney doesn't do that. Okay, so that's a minor fix that we need to correct. All right, this is not a big deal. Yeah, strengthen the medical power of attorney. That's all you have to do. Should be done anyway. Because if you say, this is the person I want to make medical decisions for me, then that's the person who makes medical decisions for you. And if anyone else comes along, regardless of who it is, and says, well, no, I'm the family member, well, he didn't say you could make the medical decisions for him. The government can't grab their children or their property without a compelling interest, and it must prevent others from doing so as well. Again, that's the case even if they're not married. All right, I'm skipping through a lot of the details because it doesn't really change any of that. Without marriage, every aspect of a couple's relationship would have to be contractually worked out from scratch in advance. And that would be a bad thing? This task may or may not prove to be an onerous inconvenience. Some people speculate the companies would start marketing canned contracts to couples, well, just like they do for pretty much everything else. There are places online where you can just download business contracts for free, sign them with a partner and you're in business, after you go through all the legal hoops to actually get it registered and everything. But without licenses or registration for marriage, okay, so now it's licenses or registration. See how we're moving the goalposts here. We start off saying, oh, we can't get rid of marriage licenses because that would be terrible. Here's what would happen without licenses. Now it's without licenses or registration. Many things, including establishing paternity, would get really messy. What century is this woman living in? We can do tests to determine if someone is the true father of a child. They're actually not that hard. And, hey, I got news for you, sunshine. Even in the olden days, just being married to the mama didn't mean you were the papa. Yeah, people slept around back then, too. Privatizing marriage would mean giving up this presumption. This would wreak havoc, especially if a marriage breaks up. And here she's quoting Kuznicki. You'd get a deluge of claims and counterclaims about child custody and paternity as partners fought to either establish or relinquish custody without any clear advance guidance from the government about how they will be treated. Look, again, unmarried couples are having children. Unmarried couples have questions of paternity and child custody. Have you never even seen Maury Povich? Marriage doesn't change that. Licensing doesn't change that. This is not mere speculation. Partly to avert such problems and to ensure that children are taken care of, pre-liberal communities that govern marriage by religious norms give a great deal of say to family, neighbors, and village elders in every aspect of a couple's life. Well, if the couple agrees to it as part of their marriage contract, okay. Otherwise, what power do they have over them? If libertarians want to expand marital freedom, they ought to try and spread the Las Vegas model, where licenses are handed out to consenting adults on demand with minimal regulation or delay. Alright, let's go back to the Second Amendment. Are we doing that with handguns? Are we doing that with free speech? Hey, we'll hand out free speech licenses on demand with minimal regulation or delay. That should be fine, wouldn't it? Who would have a problem with that? Opening the licensing procedure and deregulating marriage so it covers ever more consenting adults would hand individuals far more marital freedom with far less state involvement than privatizing marriage would. This just makes no sense. How is it not like any other contract? What is going on here that's so special? Really, what is it? What is it about marriage that doesn't apply to all these other things? Privatizing marriage can't sidestep the broader questions about who should get married to whom and under what circumstances. No, privatizing marriage says that anyone who wants to can get married under whatever circumstances they want. As long as they're consenting adults, as long as they're able to contract with each other, that's all that's needed. They write up the marriage contract. They take it down to the Register of Deeds, or put it in the Bitcoin blockchain, or write it in the family Bible, or whatever. In a liberal democracy, those who want to expand the scope of marriage have no choice but to fight and win the culture wars by slowly changing hearts and minds, just as they did with gay marriage. Do you realize that before the courts finally stepped in and said, no, you idiots, you can't restrict gay marriage. Then in poll after poll after poll, gay marriage had support of more than 55% of the population. It was like 56, 57, 58%. Some of them were even upwards of 60%. And yet Congress was doing nothing. We still had the same debates. We still had the same pundits on TV, on both sides, doing their same bullshit arguments over and over again. No, our rights are not subject to slowly winning a culture war. Our rights are our rights, all the time. It would be tantamount to replacing today's complicated IRS tax code with a simple flat tax, notes the Federalist Stella Morabito. There are no cleaner shortcuts. How about getting the government down to its constitutional function so we don't need an income tax at all? How about that? Huh? I remember when libertarians were for that. You remember those good old days when libertarians were actually pointing out that if we didn't have all this ridiculous government spending that way contravenes the Constitution and does all sorts of things government shouldn't be involved in, then we wouldn't need the income tax. We wouldn't need most of the big taxes we have. Yeah. If libertarians want a different reality, they will just have to move to Mars or Venus. Well, at least she didn't say Somalia. Yeah, because this is more reasonable. Like we don't already have solutions for these. This isn't a case of, oh, well, we'll just wait for freedom to come up with solutions, even though it will. Give someone a challenge and there's an entrepreneur out there ready to take it up. But we already have it. We already have contract laws and ways of registering contracts. We have that. We have marriages being recorded in family Bibles and the Bitcoin blockchain and other places that don't involve government. We already have rules about who can contract with whom. You can't contract with a 5-year-old. We have that. And we have all sorts of rules on paternity, child custody, and everything else for couples who aren't married. Yet, what's left? What's left? So, yeah, this is an article just full of non-thought, and so please check it out. Please check out Max Border's response. I imagine his response is pretty good. I haven't read it yet. I wanted to give my own thing, so it'll be my own arguments, and then if you go there, maybe he's made a lot of the same arguments as me. Maybe he's made different arguments. Maybe he's made better arguments. But anyway, yeah, this is no reason not to privatize marriage. And really, that should be the default anyway. It should be people saying why we need government licensing of marriage, not why we shouldn't privatize marriage. That's shifting the burden of proof. So, as always, stay strong and be free.